In the heart of a thick Nigerian forest, a little girl lay curled beneath a mango tree. Her skin was scratched. Her stomach growled. She hadn't spoken in days, but her eyes, those wide, brown eyes, were still open, still hoping. A man in a navy blue agbada stepped carefully through the forest, boots crunching over dry leaves. He was tall, broad-shouldered, with deep brown skin and a neatly trimmed beard. A driver followed behind him, carrying a file. The man stopped suddenly. He thought he heard something. A whisper? A cry? "Wait," he said. He turned toward the sound, his heart picking up speed. And there, through the branches and thorns, he saw her. A child. Frail. Sunburned. Covered in dirt. She could barely move. But when she saw him, her lips moved. "My name is Adanna," she whispered. "My stepmother left me here. Please, I don't want to die." The billionaire froze. His throat tightened. That's when everything changed. Few days earlier, Adanna was just 5 years old, the day her mother, Bianca, died. But she remembered every second. She remembered the smell of the jollof rice Amara gave her, the smile her stepmother wore when she dropped it on the table, the way her mother, Bianca, had waved her off gently, saying, "Just go and fetch the water quickly. Be careful on the road." That was the last time she saw her mother alive. When she returned, the house was in chaos. Bianca was on the floor, clutching her stomach, screaming in pain. "It's the rice. Amara gave me the rice," she cried, her face soaked in sweat. Her voice was barely more than a moan. Neighbors ran in, but nothing could be done. Within minutes, Bianca was gone. Adanna watched it all, frozen, silent, scarred. That single moment marked the end of her childhood. Her father, Obinna, returned from work and collapsed beside his wife's lifeless body. He turned to Amara, trembling. "What happened?" Amara only shrugged. "How should I know? I'm not God." Obinna stared at her, seeing a stranger in his wife's clothing. But he said nothing. What could he say? He needed her now. Bianca was gone, and Adanna was just a child. From that day on, Amara changed. The kindness vanished. The smiles disappeared. Adanna became invisible in her own home. Obinna begged Amara many times, "Please, take Adanna as your own. You know we've been praying for a child. Maybe if you love her, God will bless us." But Amara wasn't listening. All she saw when she looked at Adanna was a rival. A child who carried the legacy of the woman she hated. A child that could claim the family name before any of hers. And so, she plotted. Then came that cursed morning. The sky was still dark when Amara crept into Adanna's room. She yanked the girl out of bed. "Quiet," she hissed. Adanna rubbed her eyes. "Where are we going?" Amara didn't answer. She stuffed a worn, hand-woven bag into the little girl's arms. Inside were just a few old clothes. Then she dragged her out of the house. They walked for 2 hours, through narrow dirt paths and thick bushes. The little girl's feet bled. Her legs shook. She begged for water, for rest, but Amara kept walking. She didn't even look back. At last, they reached the forest. "Go," Amara said, shoving Adanna forward. Adanna stumbled. "Please, let's go home." But Amara had already turned around. "Please," the girl cried. No answer. Just the sound of footsteps fading. She was alone. At first, Adanna cried. For her mother, for her father, for anyone. She thought someone would come. A neighbor, her father, even Amara. But nobody came. Days passed. She found mango trees and began eating the fruit to stay alive. But after a while, the fruit made her sick. Her stomach hurt. She had diarrhea. She got weaker. She made a bed of dry leaves. She spoke to her mother's spirit at night. "If you can hear me, please send help." But the sky stayed silent. The sun rose and fell 20 times. Her tiny voice faded. Her eyes grew dim. Back in the village, Amara wept dramatically on the floor of their living room. When neighbors came rushing in, she shouted, "Adanna, she's gone. I just went to the stream, and when I came back, she was missing." Obinna, now home from a business trip, lost his mind. "What are you saying? How can she vanish?" "I don't know," Amara screamed. "I searched everywhere." Adanna went door to door, asking if anyone had seen his daughter. Posters were printed, roads searched, but nothing came up. After weeks of fruitless effort, people stopped talking about it. But Adanna never truly stopped searching. In his heart, something always told him Adanna was still alive. He just didn't know where. And far from the village, in a stretch of bushland meant for future farming, a miracle happened. Jonathan, the billionaire who owned the land, had taken a walk. He rarely traveled to that side of the property, but something had pulled him there that day. And then he heard her. "My name is Adanna. Please help me." He rushed over, fell to his knees beside her. She was skin and bones, her eyes barely open, but she was alive. "Call the driver." He barked to his aide. "Now!" They rushed her to a nearby clinic. She needed fluids, food, a doctor. But more than anything, she needed love. And Jonathan, who had no child of his own, knew in that moment what he had to do. "I will take care of you," he whispered to the girl. "You are mine now." As Adanna drifted into sleep that night, warm and safe for the first time in weeks, she clutched Jonathan's fingers with her tiny hand. But somewhere, back in the village, Amara stood in front of a mirror, and for the first time in her life, she couldn't see her own reflection. Her eyes were fading. "Why is everything getting dark?" she whispered. The night Amara lost her sight was the night her sins came knocking. At first, she thought it was dust in her eyes. She splashed water, rubbed, waited, but the blur didn't go away. By morning, her vision was like smoke shadows without shape. "Oh, Binna!" she cried, panicking. "I can't see." Adanna rushed to her side and held her face in his hands. "What do you mean you can't see?" I can't see you. I can't see anything." Her hands clawed at the air, searching for something to hold. Adanna's heart dropped. He took her to the village hospital. Nothing. They traveled to nearby towns. Herbalists, doctors, priests. They tried everything: bitter roots, spiritual baths, holy oil. Every time, the message was the same. She wronged an innocent soul. Until she seeks forgiveness, she will remain blind. Adanna stared at the floor in disbelief. "What are you hiding from me, Amara?" She cried, lied, pretended to faint, but her body was giving up too. Her legs ached, her skin darkened with patches. People began to whisper behind her back. She stopped going to church. Children mocked her in the streets. And Adanna? He was no longer the loving husband who once begged her to accept Adanna. He slept on the couch now, ate outside, came home only when necessary. Still, Amara kept her secret buried, until one night she broke. Meanwhile in Lagos, the story of Adanna was rewriting itself. She was no longer a nameless girl in the forest. Now, she was Adanna Jonathan, adopted daughter of Nigeria's most reclusive billionaire, Mr. Jonathan Okezi. After recovering in the village clinic, Adanna had been moved to Lagos. She lived in a high-rise apartment with marble floors and floor-length curtains that danced in the wind. Sandra, Jonathan's wife, embraced Adanna like a long-lost treasure. The couple had been married 10 years without a child, but from the moment they saw her, they knew they had finally become parents. Adanna started school with a new name, but her past followed her like a quiet ghost. She rarely spoke. She flinched at loud voices. She cried at night, whispering her mother's name, but Sandra stayed by her side. She taught her to braid hair, cook okra soup, do math, and slowly, Adanna began to laugh again. She was smart, brilliant, even. Within 2 years, she was the best in her class. And Jonathan? He made sure no one could ever hurt her again. Back in the village, the silence in Adanna's home was becoming too loud. One night, as the rain poured and thunder rolled across the sky, Adanna asked again, "Tell me the truth, Amara. What did you do to that child?" She trembled, holding her cane with both hands. "If you won't tell me, I'll go to the shrine myself." That's when she collapsed at his feet. "I did it," she said through tears. "I was tired of her, tired of living in her mother's shadow. You begged me to love her, but I hated her. Obinna's jaw clenched. His hands shook. You did what? I took her to the forest. I left her there. I thought wild animals would finish it. I didn't know she would survive. I didn't know. Obinna stepped back, his chest heaving. You killed her mother. You tried to kill her. And now your punishment has come. Adanna didn't know it yet, but her life was about to take another turn. She was 17 now. Beautiful. Sharp. Quiet, but confident. Her story had made waves when she graduated as the best student in her secondary school. The state governor gave her a scholarship. Headlines read, "From forest to future, orphan girl defies all odds." She was accepted into one of Nigeria's top universities. She studied software engineering. And she didn't just pass, soared. Hackathons, competitions, interviews. By the time she graduated, she was already famous in tech circles. On her graduation day, a top software company signed her on the spot. Jonathan and Sandra stood on either side of her, dressed in agbadas and jeel, clapping with tears in their eyes. The little girl they found dying in the forest was now one of the brightest lights in Africa, but something still tugged at her heart. A scar she never talked about. She had never heard from her father again, never knew what happened to Amara. And deep inside, she didn't care to know. But fate wasn't done writing. One ordinary afternoon, in a roadside buka not far from the village, a man was eating amala and goat meat. His hands were stained with red stew. The topic at the next table was children missing, found, adopted. He leaned closer when one man said, "Some children vanish and somehow survive. One billionaire rescued a child. Years ago found her in the bush. Now she's working with big companies in Lagos." Obinna dropped his spoon, his breath caught in his throat. "Excuse me," he said, turning to the man. "What did you say?" "What billionaire?" The man didn't know much, but another customer did. "I think his name is Jonathan Okezi. I know someone close to him." And as fate would have it, that someone was George, Jonathan's younger brother who had been there the very day Adanna was rescued. That same night, George met Obinna and listened quietly as he told his story. A 5-year-old girl, vanished, left with only a memory of her mother dying from poisoned rice. When George heard the name Adanna, his chest tightened. "I know her," he whispered. "I saw her, the day my brother brought her home." Obinna's knees buckled. "You mean my daughter is alive?" George nodded slowly. "She's not just alive, she's a star now." The next morning, they took a flight to Lagos. Obinna's hands shook the entire journey. "Will she recognize me?" he asked. George didn't answer. When they arrived at Jonathan's mansion, security was tight. But George waved them in. Inside, Adanna sat in the garden, reading documents for her new job. The sun shone on her skin. Her natural curls framed her face like a halo. When she saw them approaching, she stood slowly. Her eyes locked on Obinna. The silence was heavy, and then tears. But not of joy. She stepped back. "You left me." "No," Obinna said, falling to his knees. "I never stopped searching. I believed the lies. Amara said you disappeared. You let her raise me. You left me with a woman who hated me. You were supposed to protect me." Jonathan and Sandra appeared behind her. They watched silently. Obinna looked at them. "You raised her better than I ever could." Adanna turned away. "Why now?" she whispered. Obinna looked down. "Because she's blind. Sick. Dying. And she says she'll never be free unless you forgive her." Adanna's hands clenched. Her heart raced. The name alone Amara made her skin crawl. Could she face the woman who killed her mother and tried to kill her? Would she ever find peace? Adanna stood by the window of her penthouse that night, watching the Lagos skyline blink like 1,000 stars. The world outside was full of light, but inside her heart, it was dark and stormy. "Forgive her?" She said it out loud, as if testing how the words felt in her mouth. The woman who killed her mother. The woman who dragged her through thorns like trash. the woman who turned her into a ghost before she had a chance to live. Tears slipped silently down her cheeks. Behind her, Sandra walked in, carrying a warm mug of tea. "She's not asking for your friendship," Sandra said softly. "Just your forgiveness." Adanna turned. "You think I should go?" "I think you deserve peace. And sometimes peace doesn't come until we let go." Adanna didn't respond. Her mind replayed the forest, the pain, the hunger, her mother's final cry. But the truth was clear. Even with her success, the scars still lived inside her. And maybe, just maybe, going back would help her finally let them go. The next morning, 5 sleek SUVs lined up outside the compound. 2 Rolls-Royce Phantoms led the convoy. The village had never seen anything like it. Adanna stepped out of the Rolls, dressed in a flowing cream gown. Her hair was tied in a soft bun, her heels clicking gently on the dusty ground. On one side was Obinna, dressed in a muted brown kaftan. On the other, Jonathan, in a custom-made agbada, stood proudly beside her like a father guarding a jewel. Villagers peeked through windows. Children ran after the cars, pointing. Murmurs rippled like thunder through the community. "Is that her? Is that the small girl Amara said disappeared years ago?" God has finally judged. The crowd formed quickly. "She looks like her mother," an old woman whispered. Another added, "But finer and stronger." Adanna smiled faintly as she recognized faces from long Aga neighbors who had watched her cry but turned their backs. Now they came closer, trying to speak. She walked past them, straight into the compound where her nightmare began. Inside the sitting room, it was quiet. A smell of damp herbs and old wood hung in the air. Amara sat in a plastic chair, bent over, wearing a wrapper that barely clung to her frail body. Her eyes were clouded. She held a walking stick in her left hand, trembling. When she heard the door open, her head lifted slightly. "Obinna?" she asked. "Is she here?" There was silence. Then footsteps. And then Adanna's voice, calm but sharp. "I'm here." Amara stood to her feet suddenly. "Adanna? My daughter. My child," she cried, stretching her hands into the air. "I'm not your daughter," Adanna replied, voice steady. "You left me to die." Amara dropped to her knees, groping the floor, crawling toward the voice. "I was wicked, foolish and jealous. I thought I was winning, but I destroyed myself. Please, please forgive me." Obinna stood frozen behind her, watching the scene unfold like a horror film turned tragedy. "I killed your mother," Amara cried. "Yes, I did it. I poisoned her food because I was tired of seeing her smile, of seeing her win your father's heart." Gasps echoed from the neighbors, standing outside the windows. Adanna looked at her, a small, broken woman on the floor. The same woman who once dragged her barefoot through a forest without blinking. She stepped back. "You don't deserve my forgiveness." Amara sobbed louder. I know I don't. But they told me. I'll never see again unless you say the words. I am blind. Empty without a child at 50. I am dead inside. Please." Adanna turned away, heart pounding. Sandra placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. Jonathan stepped beside her. "You can still walk away," he whispered. But Adanna took a breath. "No," she said. She turned back to Amara. "You took everything from me, but somehow I still became everything I wanted to be. Not because of you, but in spite of you. I forgive you. Not because you deserve it, but because I deserve peace." Amara let out a cry, then silence, and then, suddenly she blinked. Again, and again. Her eyes darted around. I can see." She stared at Adanna, stunned. "I can see you. I can see your face." She broke down into violent sobs. "You are beautiful. So beautiful. Oh God." Adanna stood motionless. "I forgave you," she said, "but that doesn't mean I want you in my life." Amara nodded, her lips quivering. "I understand. I don't deserve you." Obinna turned to Adanna. "You've done more than I expected. Thank you." The villagers whispered blessings. Some cried. Others turned their eyes away in shame. But Adanna didn't wait for applause. She walked past them, climbed back into the Rolls-Royce, and shut the door. That night, Amara sat on her bed, holding the same spoon she once used to serve poison. The house was quiet. No children, no laughter, just shadows. She looked at her reflection in a cracked mirror and whispered, "I can see, but I can never unsee what I've done." Obinna watched her from the doorway. He had made a decision. "I want a divorce," he said coldly. "I can't share a house with a murderer." Amara didn't argue. She only nodded. Tears rolled down her cheeks. For the first time, she truly understood what it meant to lose everything. Back in Lagos, Adanna sat beside Jonathan on their rooftop balcony. Sandra brought her a plate of suya. "You were brave," Jonathan said. Adanna nodded. "It still hurts, but I'm free now." Then she smiled, a real smile. And for the first time in years, she felt whole. But peace never lasts forever. Because deep in the night, as Amara sat alone in the dark, staring at the stars she once wished on, she picked up the same poison she had used on Bianca, and whispered, "Maybe she'll forgive me in the underworld." The night was thick with silence. Even the crickets outside Amara's window seemed to hold their breath. She sat on the cold floor of her once proud living room, the same place where she used to scream orders, the same house she once guarded like a kingdom. But now there were no servants, no friends, not even her husband she tried to own and killed for. Just a bottle. The label had peeled off years ago, but she knew what it contained. It was the same bottle she had once poured from that night she ended Bianca's life, and now it sat before her like an old friend. She unscrewed the cap. Her hands trembled. She whispered, "I thought I was winning, but I lost everything." She raised the bottle to her lips and paused. A small, crumpled photo on the table caught her eye. It was Bianca, smiling, holding a baby Adanna, taken long before the jealousy, long before the hatred. Tears spilled freely from Amara's eyes. "I'm sorry, Bianca," she sobbed. "I was just afraid that love would never find me." Then, without another word, she drank. The next morning, a neighbor found her body curled on the floor, lifeless, empty. The villagers gathered quickly. The story spread like wildfire. "Amara is dead. Poison. They say it's the same one she used on Bianca." But there was no screaming, no chaos, just hushed whispers and quiet. It was like the village itself understood her story had ended. Obinna stood at the doorway of their home, his face unreadable. He didn't cry. He didn't speak. He only made a phone call and arranged for a small, private burial. No church choir, no ceremony, just a plain wooden coffin and 3 people. Obinna, a priest, and Adanna. She had flown in that morning, not because she loved Amara, not because she needed closure, but because she needed to witness the end of the woman who killed her mother and tried to destroy her. As the coffin was lowered into the ground, the wind picked up. Adanna stood beside her biological father. Obinna dressed in a modest black gown, her hair tied neatly behind. No makeup, no earrings, just raw silence. She looked down at the grave, her expression unreadable. Inside her chest was a storm. Amara had been the devil of her childhood, the thief of her peace. But as the final shovel of sand dropped, Adanna whispered under her breath, "I forgive you again, but I still can't forget." Obinna looked at her, his eyes brimming with guilt. "Thank you for coming." Adanna nodded, but said nothing more. She turned and walked away from the grave without looking back. And just like that, the chapter closed. 2 months later, joy returned to her life like a sunrise. She met Emeka, a 34-year-old Nigerian pilot with a heart of gold and the sense of humor of a child. They met at a tech conference where he was speaking on aviation technology and she was showcasing a new AI-powered flight system. Their eyes met, their souls clicked, and within a year, the wedding plans began. The day of the wedding was like something from a dream. The venue, a glass-walled mansion overlooking the Atlantic Ocean in Lagos. The dress, custom-made, hand-beaded with crystal stones, fit for royalty. The guests, a who's who of Nigeria's elite. Tech founders, business magnates, even state governors. But what made the day unforgettable? Adanna walked down the aisle with two father-son on each side. Obinna on her left, Jonathan on her right. The crowd rose, clapping for the couple. Cameras clicked. She was no longer the abandoned child in the bush. She was the queen of her own fairy tale. At the altar, Emeka waited in his navy blue tuxedo, eyes full of emotion. And when Adanna reached him, he whispered, "You're my miracle." She smiled and replied, "I'm my own miracle." 2 years later, the miracle doubled. She gave birth to twins, a boy and a girl. They named the girl Bianca, in honor of her late mother, and the boy, Jonathan, for the man who gave her a second chance at life. They lived in a stunning home overlooking the Lekki Lagoon, filled with warmth, laughter, and bedtime stories of strength and second chances. One evening, as she tucked in her daughter, little Bianca looked up and asked, "Mummy, were you ever sad when you were little?" Adanna paused. She looked out the window, at the stars. "Yes," she said softly. "But those sad days helped me find the people who really love me." "Like Daddy? And Grandpa Jonathan?" She smiled. "And Grandpa Obinna?" Adanna blinked. "Yes, even him." Then she kissed her forehead and turned off the light. But peace has a price. Because miles away, a man in a dark room stared at an old news clipping, "Young orphan found in forest, rescued by Billionaire, now Africa's leading software genius." He placed the paper down, lit a cigarette, and murmured, "So, the girl survived after all." The night was warm in Abuja, but the air inside the dimly lit apartment was cold. A man in his 50s, scarred face, sunken eyes, and hands stained by time and regret, sat hunched over a cluttered desk. All around him were clippings articles, photos, screenshots. At the center of it all was one story. Little orphan, rescued by Billionaire, now Africa's youngest tech star. The photo showed Adanna on stage, holding her award. Behind her stood Jonathan and Sandra, clapping with pride. He gritted his teeth. She wasn't supposed to survive. He pulled out a worn, folded document from the bottom of a drawer. A death certificate, Bianca Ume, signed and stamped. He remembered that day clearly. He was there. He was the one who gave Amara the poison. The man's name was Chief Ekanea, distant relative of Obinna, a family friend who once claimed to be supporting him after Bianca's death. But in reality, he had his eyes on Obinna's land, and Bianca was the obstacle. She had uncovered documents that would have exposed Akine's illegal claim to the family's ancestral estate. So, he allied with Amara. "Poison her," he had whispered. "I'll take care of the rest." But things went sideways. Bianca died. Amara panicked. Adanna survived. And now, 15 years later, Adanna was not only alive, but powerful. Too powerful. If she ever looked into her mother's case again, she might find him. Back in Lagos, Adanna sat in her office, now the youngest vice president at a global software firm. She had just returned from presenting at an international tech conference in Dubai. Her twins had painted welcome cards for her, which now hung on her glass wall. But something kept poking at her spirit. It wasn't the past. It wasn't Amara. It was a memory. A single sentence her mother had once said during a late evening chat on their balcony in the village, just days before she died. "If anything ever happens to me, check the land documents. Promise me." She'd been 5. She had almost forgotten. But now, it returned like thunder. She pulled up her laptop and began to dig. It started with the original will of her grandfather. Then the sudden transfer of land documents after Bianca's death. And then she found it. Chief Akene's signature, forged, on multiple files. The very next day, Adanna traveled back to the village with Obinna and a small legal team. At the land registry office, they presented the evidence to the commissioner. Within minutes, a quiet case turned into a firestorm. A full-scale investigation was opened. Arrests were made. Chief Ekene's name was plastered across every headline on the news channels. Land fraud kingpin arrested in shocking twist, orphan turned tech star exposes decades of theft. But Adanna didn't care about the land. She cared about truth. She requested a meeting with Akene in prison. It was granted. In a cold interrogation room, Ekene sat across from her, wrists cuffed to the table. She entered quietly, dressed in a fitted black blazer and a calm expression. Ekene looked up. "You've grown," he muttered. Adanna sat down, staring directly at him. "Why did you kill my mother?" He let out a shaky breath. She was smart. Too smart. She was about to expose everything. Amara just wanted her gone. I made it happen. You were 5. I never thought you'd survive. Never thought you'd matter. Adanna leaned forward. I mattered then. I matter now. Ekene looked away. I'm sorry. Adanna stood up. I didn't come for an apology. I came so you'd see what you couldn't destroy. And with that, she left. Months passed. Ekene was sentenced to life in prison. The stolen lands were returned. Obinna finally reclaimed his family's heritage and donated a large portion to build a children's rescue center in Bianca's name. The Bianca Adanna Hope Foundation. Adanna ran it personally. They rescued abandoned children, built schools in remote villages, created coding camps for girls. Her story became a Netflix documentary. Her name became a national symbol of resilience. And every year on her birthday, she returned to the forest, to the very tree where she once lay dying. She planted a mango sapling there and told her children the truth, not of revenge, but of redemption. On her next wedding anniversary, Emeka surprised her with a private flight over her village. As they flew, Adanna looked down at the land below green, rich, beautiful. I was born in that pain, she whispered, but I chose not to stay there. Emeka took her hand. And now look at you. No, she smiled. Look at us. Inside a wide hall, packed with students. Adanna stands on stage, holding a mic. Behind her, a banner reads, Never let where you come from decide where you're going. She speaks with tears in her eyes. I was once a little girl who ate mangoes from the bush to survive. Now I teach others to code, to build, to lead. Let my story be your reminder. Your beginning doesn't have to be your end. There was standing ovation. Sandra and Jonathan wipe tears in the front row. Obinna claps with pride. Her children cheer. Her husband beams. Because she didn't just survive, she rewrote the ending. What is your view about this story? Where are you watching from? If you like this story, comment, share, and subscribe to our channel for more interesting stories.